Mara Chen was 11 the first time she saw the river glow. Her father had lifted her onto his shoulders for the inaugural cascade, when every lamppost and bridge cable in Brook Hollow shimmered from dusk gray to a jubilant white. People on the Riverwalk burst into applause, not because the town council had spent money on fancy LEDs or because someone yelled 3, 2, 1 into a microphone, but because the lights had responded to them. Screens in the plaza displayed real-time sentiment lines scraping upward, joyful emojis, positive speech analysis, heart rate averages trending contentedly low. For one crystalline moment, the entire population's mood had painted the sky, and the sky had answered back. That was the night Mara decided she would work on the Aurora system when she grew up. 17 years later, she ran it. Brook Hollow's network had widened since those early days. Fiber optic filaments were woven through the oaks along Main Street, LEDs embedded in crosswalks, even a mist fountain that could project color onto vapor. The software had matured too. Natural language processors scraping local social feeds, acoustic sensors tucked under eaves, machine learning models detecting everything from irritability in car horn patterns to statistical upticks in laughter heard from open cafe doors. Where all inputs converged, a palette engine translated collective sentiment into hue, saturation, and rhythm. A peaceful evening became blue-green lanterns that pulsed like breath. Excitement brought sunrise orange. Communal grief washed the streets in violet. Brook Hollow residents had internalized the chromatic code the way sailors understood weather by cloud shapes. They trusted it, and that was the problem. Mara's desk in the Civic Tech Annex was a clutter of energy drink cans and tangled charging cables. She had spent the last 2 weeks investigating a cluster of anomalies, brief flashes of crimson that had slashed through otherwise tranquil scenes. The log tags called them non-deterministic spikes, a sterile phrase for something that felt more like a scream than a glitch. At first, she blamed noise. Sentiment data was messy, after all. Sarcasm, bots, machines mishearing fireworks as gunshots. But the occurrences were too neat. They arrived during thresholds, a theater intermission, the 10-minute halftime of a high school playoff, the last call at bars. Each burst lasted precisely 90 seconds, then vanished before an automated filter could downweight the outliers. 90 seconds was long enough for a mood to tip. Across her terminal, Mara replayed security footage from last Friday's pep rally. The lights above Riverstone Stadium should have been amber. Anticipatory excitement. Instead, scarlet poured from the canopy, staining teenage faces until they looked like masks at some ancient war festival. Within moments, a pushing match broke out near the hot dog cart. By the time the color cooled to amber again, 2 students were bleeding and a paramedic was wheeling a third off the track with a fractured wrist. Coincidence, huh? The voice came from Mara's doorway. Theo Kim, freelance journalist and chronic municipal irritant, leaned against the frame. His notepad was already open. "Don't you people knock?" Mara muttered. "City Hall keeps evading my questions. I thought I'd try the source." He pointed at the paused video. "You know what crimson does to a crowd's cortisol levels?" "I wrote the study." She sighed. "It's a glitch." Theo flipped to a new page, pen hovering. "Or sabotage." Mara glared at him, but something uneasy fluttered inside her ribs. She turned back to the logs. "Even if someone wanted to hack us, the network's isolated from the public internet." "Isolation is a myth," Theo said softly, "especially when the architecture was published in IEE Spectrum, including the maintenance ports." Mara stiffened. She had authored that paper herself last year. Transparency had been part of the grant requirements. "Whatever's happening," she said, "I'll fix it before the harvest parade." The parade, Brook Hollow's biggest event, was 4 days away. Tens of thousands would flood downtown. Every shopfront would hook into the Aurora feed for synchronized ambiance. The thought of those crowds bathed in weaponized color made Mara's fingers tremble on her keyboard. Theo snapped a picture of the log screen. "I'd like to help." "Since when do reporters help?" Since my kid's sister got caught in that stadium brawl and needed stitches. Mara's jaw tightened. Come back tomorrow at 8. Quietly. He left without another word. But Mara could feel the conversation echoing. Sabotage, sabotage, sabotage. That night she ran a packet capture across the fiber loops linking the control hub to the peripheral nodes. The signal looked clean. No extraneous traffic, no foreign injection. She ran checksum comparisons on the firmware, hashed against the escrow copies. They matched. Yet the crimson flashes had happened. 90 seconds each. Purposeful. At 2:04 a.m., the terminal chimed. An automated alert flagged another spike, this time at the dockside night market. The cameras rolled. Once again, placid teal switched to feral red. A woman shouted, a bottle shattered, vendor tents rattled like dice. The entire sequence lasted 90 seconds. Then, as though ashamed, the system faded to earnest blue. Mara's eyes hurt. She closed the feed, grabbed her coat, and jogged to the server room. The hardware rack's heartbeat LEDs glowed a steady green. Cooling fans hummed like lullabies. It felt obscene. How placid machines could be while outside human emotions were sloshing like acid. She dropped to the floor, opened the cable gutter, and located the fiber coupler that bridged the municipal loop to the old water treatment plant. That spur had been decommissioned years ago when the plant shut down, but the fiber still lay there, dark, leftover, forgotten. Unless someone had remembered. Mara traced the cable on her tablet map. It extended 3.4 kilometers to a brick complex that now housed only pigeons and graffiti. She stood, wiping dust from her palms. If isolation had been breached, it wasn't through software. It was through a literal umbilical cord. She pocketed a flashlight. Theo met her at dawn in the annex parking lot, yawning over a thermos. He drove. Mara navigated. Brook Hollow's early streets were lavender, the Aurora system registering mild curiosity, the emotional equivalent of people rubbing sleep from their eyes. 10 minutes later, they turned onto a weed-choked lane flanked by chain link. The water treatment plant loomed, windows boarded, its smokestack wearing a crown of rust. Mara's stomach fluttered. Inside, their footfalls echoing, they followed the trajectory of the fiber on her tablet. It led them around empty tanks to an office whose door sagged on one hinge. Theo pried it open. Old computers sat like thawing glaciers, dust blanketing their beige cases. But one workstation hummed. Its guts had been replaced with modern boards. Cables snaked to a mobile antenna mounted on the window frame. Theo whistled. Isolation, huh? Mara ignored him. She sat, pulled a USB drive from her pocket, and plugged in. The terminal flashed a login prompt for Aurora Local Mayent. She tried the default password. It laughed at her. Someone had changed it. Theo circled the desk, snapping photos. Whoever it is, they run scripts on a schedule, he said, pointing to a crone table on a side monitor. See that? At 8 Euro 1930, 2345, the 90-second intervals were defined right there, with labels like Rile Up 1, Rile Up 2. Mara's pulse hammered. She scrolled. Next event, Thursday, 18th Ray. The exact start of the mayoral debate in Riverfront Plaza, scheduled to draw thousands. She yanked the USB stick out. We have to pull the power. Theo shook his head. And alert them we're on to them? Better to trace the connection. Mara hesitated. If they simply yanked the plug, the saboteur might switch to another node. But if they tried to track deeper, they might lose time. Theo must have read her face. Harvest Parade. 2 days. We need evidence, not just a hunch, or the council will stall us. He was right. With trembling fingers, Mara initiated a packet sniff. The remote IP chains hopped through VPNs. She followed breadcrumbs until a final hop terminated in City Hall. Specifically, 1044.217, an internal address assigned to Councilman Anthony Dover's office. Dover had built his political brand on common sense order. He'd fought to increase police budgets, lobbied for curfews, and called Aurora an experiment in emotional nannying. If public mood lighting turned riotous, he could proclaim vindication. Mara exhaled slowly. He's framing the system to fail. Theo's camera clicked. Now we have motive. They copied logs, shut the workstation, and left everything appearing untouched. In the car, Mara felt dirt under her nails. We need to patch the core algorithm, redirect control keys. Yes, Theo said. But Dover still holds a seat on the oversight committee. He could block any patch as unvetted. We bypass him, Mara said. Deploy manually from the tower. The tower was Aurora's heart, a 60-meter obelisk of reinforced glass downtown, encasing the master light engine. Normally it was ornamental. People took engagement photos in its kaleidoscopic swirl. But at its base sat a maintenance console that could override every node at once. Physical keys, air-gapped. Theo grinned. A heist, perfect for a newspaper feature. It's not a feature, Mara snapped, but she couldn't help the adrenaline fizzing at the idea. The day of the mayoral debate dawned golden. Market stalls unfurled banners. Campaign volunteers handed out pins. Aurora signaled gentle yellow, a color of attentiveness. Mara and Theo entered the tower's service corridor wearing city worker vests. She carried a hard case holding a patched firmware image. Theo carried coffee like any technician who needed caffeine before crawling into wiring guts. Inside the maintenance room, fluorescent lights buzzed. A guard checked their badges, barely glancing. Mara's heart pounded as she slotted her keycard into the console. Screen came alive. Authentication accepted. 5 minutes. She initiated firmware upload, assigning new encryption tokens, gutting the crone hooks Dover's scripts exploited. Progress bar, 12%. In the plaza outside, a jumbotron showed the mayor shaking hands. A sea of supporters waved placards. So far, Aurora's LEDs remained steady. 23%. Theo watched from the doorway. We might actually... An alarm bleeped. Download paused. On the console, red text. Remote override requested. Mara cursed. Dover had sensed the unauthorized update. If she accepted, her patch would abort. If she denied, conflict resolution logic would lock the console, leaving them stuck for hours. She made a third choice. Yanked the fiber coupler. Metallic snap. The console's link to the supervisory network severed. Alarms escalated, but her local session persisted. No remote handshake required. Progress bar crawled, 38%. Theo closed the door as if that could muffle everything. Outside, through the glass facade, Mara saw the skyline stutter. The lamps bordering the plaza flickered, crimson bleeding at their edges like bruises. He's pushing a red cycle, Theo said. The crowd's murmur amplified, some primal part of human psyche responding to the color of danger. She saw a sign ripped from its stick. 61%. A thud rattled the maintenance door. Security? Mara ignored it. The loading wheel spun. The window showed chaos blooming. 2 rivals shoved near the podium. A chant turned ugly. Microphones picked up shouting. 82%. Sweat slid into Mara's eye. The door handle jiggled, then stopped. Overhead, backup sirens wailed. The building assumed a security lockdown sequence. 97%. Mara's breath hitched. Come on! Done! She jabbed execute. The patched firmware propagated outward from the tower through separate laser links, skipping compromised lines. She instructed the pallet engine. Saturate with cool 255 180 255, soft teal. Per research, the most effective diffuser of mass agitation. Outside, red stuttered, fought, then receded as if drawn into a drain. Teal spilled through the plaza, tinting faces like deep sea divers. The volume dropped a notch, fists unclenched. Mara watched tears bloom in one man's eyes as the fight impulse evaporated and left him embarrassed, bewildered. Theo exhaled. You did it. But her relief was cut short by a metallic click. The maintenance door swung inward to reveal 2 private security officers. Dover's campaign crest on their lapels. Behind them stood the councilman himself, cheeks pink with fury. "Step away from the console," Dover snapped. Theo lifted his camera. "Councilman Dover, care to comment on directing riotous color spikes through an illegal back door?" Dover's eyes darted to the lens. "Baseless. I have logs," Mara said softly. "And the workstation at the water plant. Still running. Ethernet fingerprint. Timestamps with your office IP. You're finished." Dover recovered enough to sneer. "You think Brook Hollow will believe a hacker over an elected official?" "They just watched red vanish the moment you tried to force it," Theo answered. "And their bruises from last week haven't healed." Dover lunged as if to grab the camera. The guards hesitated. Citizens milled beyond the glass, streaming footage on phones. Finally, Dover growled, "We'll see," and stormed off, the guards scrambling after him. Theo looked at Mara, amazement creasing his face. "Sunlight's a good disinfectant." She wanted to laugh, but trembled instead. The console chimed. Sentiment stabilized, synchronization complete. 2 days later, Harvest Parade Day arrived. For the first time in weeks, Mara granted herself pleasure in observing the system. Floats rolled down Maple Avenue trailing confetti. Aurora answered with multi-hued ribbons, peach and mint and ivory, never lingering too long on a single note, as though a master painter gently rinsed and renewed the brush between strokes. Mara and Theo stood on a hay bale near the cider booth, tired but triumphant. Dover had been arrested for unauthorized computer intrusion, an archaic statute, but practical. The mayoral debate resumed that evening under watchful, calm light. The crowd had discussed policy instead of brawl statistics. "Will the city scrap Aurora after this?" Theo asked. Mara watched children chase color shadows on the pavement. "No, they'll add checks, demand audits. Maybe that's good." "Trust but verify," Theo said, raising his paper cup in toast. Mara raised hers. The lights shifted to white-gold communal satisfaction. A feedback loop, yes, but transparent now, made stronger by the wound that had nearly killed it. She remembered being 11 on her father's shoulders, watching the river glow. She had learned then that technology could interpret human hearts. Now she knew it could also manipulate them, and that the defense against manipulation wasn't to dim the lights but to keep every cable open to scrutiny, every hand visible. Above Brook Hollow, the Aurora system pulsed like a living thing, not perfect, never safe from misuse, but reclaimed. The next morning, Mara returned to the annex carrying a box of donuts for the night shift engineers. She set it on the table, powered up her console, and initiated a routine health check. All green. A new email pinged from the mayor's office. "Interim Advisory Panel on Ethical Public Tech, appointment invitation." She smiled. Outside her window, the town awoke under a quiet sky. Lampposts shading from dawn rose to steady tawny. Somewhere a garbage truck hissed, a dog barked, a toddler cheered at the color change. Ordinary sounds, the sort of sounds the saboteurs had tried to drown in sirens. Mara typed a reply. "I accept," then leaned back, letting the monitor's gentle glow wash over her. Colors mattered, she thought, but motives mattered more. Light could guide or blind. Code could serve or subvert. The difference, as always, lay in whose hands held the switch, and who had the courage to seize it back when it was wrenched aside. On the plaza fountain, teal droplets glittered in the sun. Not happiness exactly. Something sturdier, resolve, tempered by experience, glinting between citizens like wires carrying volts of vigilance. Brook Hollow would remember red, yes, but it would also remember the precise moment red receded, replaced by calm made possible through collective will. That memory would glow longer than any bulb. And Mara Chen, architect and guardian, would keep watching the lights. So they could keep watching everyone else, honestly this time, reflecting without distorting, reminding the town of its own shared pulse. She finished her coffee, rolled up her sleeves, and got back to work.